Hi, so this week we are joined by Jay Hawkridge, who was a music journalist from the
Hi, nice
Media
to see
Award.
you. So I obviously have been doing this for a couple of years now. I first got into music journalism when I was still studying at university. And I literally just sent someone who is now one of my best friends, a really close friend, on Twitter. I sent a direct message and said, I see that you are working for this publication. It would be great if I could get an email, get involved any way that I can. Here's a few ideas that I can kind of bounce around to you. Sent him an idea of an article and he published it almost instantaneously. It was like the next couple of days. He asked for another one, said, feel free to send any more over. So I sent another article and then literally next couple of days again, like clockwork, I got an email from the founder of the magazine saying that they were redistributing the team, that they would like me to come on board and get more of an active engagement as opposed to just obviously picking up my own ideas. They said, obviously, we've got our own schedule. There's artists that you can interview, there's albums that you can review, there's kind of more opportunities. So I popped down to London, interviewed an artist called Alice in Wonderland. She's a DJ. And that kind of spiraled into a nice, really snowball of my career. I've been working for Tomorrow now for just under 3 years with them, which has been really fun because I've had a chance to interview a lot of artists from Australia, the US, obviously all over Europe. They really do pride themselves on finding like emerging and fresh talent as well as like on the cusp. So they, sadly, I did not get the Billie Eilish cover, but somebody got a Billie Eilish cover just before she blew up. But my first cover story was actually Lauren from Fifth Harmony, which was a really nice big moment for me because I think like the year previously, I was in the O2 Arena in Birmingham, like seeing them live, dancing my head off. So that was really fun to kind of obviously go from being a small town boy from Yorkshire to, a man, I guess, in Birmingham, kind of living his dreams and interviewing people that he's admired for years. It's just really humbling, especially when obviously the industry is going through a really turbulent change and it is very challenging to stay energized and to stay focused. Like I think one thing that we really need to appreciate as people and as journalists is that we have such passion for the things that we do. We really connect with these things on a deeper level than other people, which is why we are kind of like the torchbearers to kind of bring these passions and art to life. But yeah, that's kind of my story, really. I've done 6 cover stories for Tomorrow now, which has been really exciting. I did a cover story with Tove Lo, which was really cool. I managed to talk to her for like an hour, chatted her head off about her music and said how much I, again, have been an absolute fangirl since day one. I did my latest cover story was with the YouTuber Bretman Rock, which was really fun because he was in Hawaii and I spent the entire day until like 9 p.m. just like in a ball of anxiety waiting to get it done because I was so nervous. But he was lovely and that was really fun, and also a new challenge for me to kind of challenge myself in terms of going from interviewing musicians to translating this and kind of expanding my skill set into interviewing people who were YouTubers. He's obviously in the beauty industry. So it's been a really kind of eye-opening experience and definitely a lesson in self-discipline, because I think one thing that you definitely need if you are freelance and working remotely is to be in charge of your own schedule. I know that I have a lot of trouble with that. I know that if I can wake up in the morning and look at my calendar and know that I am my own boss and in charge of myself, it's so easy to push things back an hour because you're not feeling like it. It's so easy to think, oh, well, can I fit this in tomorrow? And especially when you have ideas and it all comes from your head as well, because you can really easily try to convince yourself that that idea is not finished yet and you need a bit more time to think it over. And I'd say the best thing to do is just to smash it out and get it done. I think discipline is key. And it's not that hard as well. I think one of my mantras is definitely that everything, you want and dream of is on the other side of fear. And often it is kind of like that mental wall that we have to get ourselves past. And then once we get past that, we realize that it actually wasn't so bad and it was actually really fun. So that's how I stay like in love with journalism.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you mentioned before how you were like doing like other jobs on the side of journalism. For people who are currently like say they're working in the hospitality industry or retail or just doing something else, but they're wanting to apply for journalism jobs and start writing, do you have any advice on sort of managing your time and actually finding the time to write and put real effort into that sort of thing?
I mean, I think one of the nicest things about the industry at the minute is the fact that we are obviously so online. It's not kind of tabloidy press anymore. Like, it's all Twitter, Instagram, social based. So it is definitely one of those things that you can pick up. Like, I know that I used to be on my work break when I was working at a restaurant, and I would be scrolling through Twitter and say liking or bookmarking tweets. With like casting calls, pitches, emails of journalists, kind of like articles to read later. And then when I could actually devote myself to sit at my desk and have some time, or, you know, get home and get into bed and just sit and focus for a little while, I already had this like backlog of things that I'd already saved. And that kind of saved me that next step of looking and researching, because the industry doesn't move that fast. As much as we convince ourselves that it does, with constant content coming out, and our social feeds are constantly being updated with new articles, new interviews, new music coming out every week now. There's too much to keep up with. You'll often find that like the best things and the most important things do take a time to roll out. So it's easy to convince ourselves that we feel left behind, and that if we've had an idea for a day and we haven't done anything with it, that it is outdated and it is stale. And that's not the case, because I think what I found is that when you actually have got something passionate to say and something that means something to you, there is a timeless element to it, I think.
And like, speaking of passion and stuff, what advice would you give to people who are wanting to write about entertainment and new music coming out, new films, TV shows, whatever it is, but are wanting to put their own spin on it, but don't necessarily have, or maybe struggle to come up with ideas of how they can do that?
So I mean, I'm going through a similar transition myself. I mean, obviously we have had such a change career-wise, personally and kind of industry-wise this year. And I've really found myself not becoming a little bit bored of like how things were going, but I knew that I was finding and discovering a lot of music that I was necessarily not getting the opportunity to review and talk about. Because obviously with a lot of bigger artists and with a lot of artists pushing back releases or cancelling tours with the pandemic, like we are in kind of a little bit of a low at the moment. So my advice would be to do what I'm trying to do, which I've just started up like a separate website, which is just jayhawkridge.com, like just me talking from myself. And that is basically just a chance for me to put all these thoughts into my head that I have about music that I really like, that necessarily won't get picked up anywhere else. So I would say that's one thing that's really, really good to do. I think a lot of people are put off by the term blog, and, you know, you think blog, you think like MSN, kind of like early 2000s, you think really outdated. There's no place for it. You know, who's going to read it? Who's going to kind of be engaged? And the most important thing to realize, especially with something like what we do, is that as much as you're doing it for other people and to be read, first and foremost, you're doing it for passion. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it because you have something to say. And I think the only way to kind of hone and train that instinctual voice is to practice. Even if, say, there was someone who like heard an album and really gelled with it, but didn't feel confident enough to show anyone what they thought about it, just write it yourself, and then, you know, leave it a couple of days and then revisit it and see what you think of it, what your thoughts are on that. Because gradually, it's just like everything else. You have to practice. You have to practice.
And you've mentioned interviewing some big names, like, so does it feel quite daunting sometimes? And if it does, how do you get past it?
Oh my God, I get the worst social anxiety every single time. I don't know what it is at all, because I've done it for a while now. I think it is just because when you are talking about music and when you are talking about an artist's career and their legacy, obviously this art is something that is so personal to them. You want to do it justice. You worried about kind of maybe interpreting the music wrong or different to how they portrayed. You know, you're worried about not connecting with it as much. But like the most important thing that I try and remember myself is just to have fun, because this is such an exclusive opportunity to be able to talk with someone that you admire about something that they're so proud of and something they've spent a lot of time crafting. I think once you get over that hurdle and realize that as much as you are talking to, say, someone really big who's had a lot of commercial success, you know, this interview, you are talking to the person. You're talking to them. You're not talking to the brand, the image. You are talking to someone who is exactly the same position that you are in, someone who is passionate about what they do. And once you kind of level the playing field and realize that these people who you may have idolized for years are now slowly becoming your peers, I think that's a really endearing factor, because it like really drives a lot of self-confidence as well, to realize that you have got yourself to this place.
When it comes to your journey in music journalism, so you didn't do a journalism degree. Do you think that's impacted your career or your start into the industry at all?
I mean, definitely, because I didn't really have any connections when I first started. Obviously, I had to graft and look online and kind of find things here and there. I know a few friends that I've since met that have done journalism courses, that have had obviously connections as part of their degree. They've done like PR, like sidestep modules, and they found connections that way. So it definitely is a harder route, especially as well coming from like a rural Yorkshire background. Like, I didn't really merge with people that were kind of in the industry anyway, so I have felt quite secluded for a lot of the time. But I mean, I actually worked with Defected Records as well for an entire year last year, and I would basically became their like live events correspondent, where I would just go to events, have a good time, and then the day after just kind of share my thoughts as like a fan on the ground, as a way to promote upcoming events, and say what much like rave culture means to me. And I literally, this is a massive big break. So I only got into that because I was at Manchester, at Victoria Warehouse on New Year's Day 2019, and I bumped into the label founder of Defected. So I basically ran up to him, a little bit worse for wear, halfway through the night, and I just shook his hand and said, thank you so much. Like, I'm having a great time. I just wanted to say this is the perfect way to start the year. And he was like, thank you, mate. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful life. And then I, again, out of passion, wrote an article about how much I love Defected, sent it to him on Twitter. I owe everything to Twitter. I sent it to him on Twitter. He basically tweeted that he was in a taxi in New York and he was bored. So I said, here's an article I wrote about you. You don't have to be bored anymore. And I was like, I am a writer. I would love to be involved with you in the future. And then 10 minutes later, I had a direct message saying, I'm back in London in March. Come to the office and meet me. And that was it. Like, I went all around the country with them. I did a 6-day stint in Croatia with them, which was really fun. So like, the main thing that is kind of leading me down my path of life is just to be involved in things that I'm already interested in. Don't try and chase things because you think it's the right way to go. Don't try and, follow trends and think you should be writing about something that you're not interested in from the heart, because that's not going to get you anywhere. If you are interested in something, I think it naturally will lead you to where you want to go.
Yeah. So clearly Twitter has worked really well for you. Is there any advice you'd give to other people who maybe don't know how to utilize Twitter like they should?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the slightest at all. Like, I hate the app so much as well. I found myself scrolling through it endlessly. The biggest thing that I can say is definitely just to follow like the actual specific journalists of the articles. So obviously you will follow like your Notion, your ID, your Vice, etc., etc. But the key thing that I've known to look out for is to actually follow the actual journalists, because a lot of them will do, freelancing for other places. They will do like have their own Medium pages, so they'll post personal articles. And that's a really fun way to stay interested in people and to find out obviously what is going through their head as well. It's not about kind of like trying to jump on and be the next person and kind of fight your way to the top. It's about being part of this community. Like, I've started talking to so many people in the past year or so that I have followed online for a couple of years, and I felt that I was too small for, or that I wasn't popular enough, like in terms of like the bylines that I had or the publications that I'd written for. And then like, it only takes one or so article that someone is engaged with that you've written for them to open that dialogue. And exactly the same the other way around. Like, if you read an article that you really admire, drop a journalist that's wrote it like a DM or like a message or reply and say, like, that touched me, like, I enjoyed this for whatever reason. Because again, we're all in this together, we're all the exact same. And the nicest thing is knowing that someone has read your work, and if possible, that they were able to understand it and take something from it. Like, that is the easiest way to form a friendship, is when it's sincere.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've like done a similar thing in the last 6 months, followed loads of journalists, and it is such a really like supportive and wholesome community once you're part of it. Everyone's super uplifting. But aside from getting involved with other journalists in the community and stuff, are there any skills that you think are essential for music journalism?
I think patience is the main one, because it can be quite easy to kind of work yourself into a state of anxiety, especially surrounding, say, upcoming releases, upcoming schedules of like albums that are coming out. You obviously want to jump on that idea straight away, but you really should just take a step back and realize that everyone has busy schedules. Often you yourself have such a busy schedule that you kind of neglecting so many things. So I think patience is a key one. I think trusting in yourself is a massive skill that I'm starting to learn. I know that people might have mixed feelings about gut instinct, but I think when you have a great idea, I think it's important to stick to your guns and to not be put off. Because I think perseverance is one key thing that I've learned the last couple of years. Like there's a couple of article ideas that I have, say, had for a year or so before they've been acknowledged by someone else. Like I've pitched them multiple times. Like I say to my friends that are not in the industry, when they ask what it's like, I say that it's like fishing, like pitching, because you will send out so many emails to so many places with all these ideas, and you're only going to get a handful of replies back. And, you know, so out of all these emails that you send, you get a handful back, and then you get so many no's, then you get a few maybes, and eventually you can whittle it down to 1 or 2 or 3 yeses. And it's so easy to be disheartened by this, by thinking, all these people were not interested in my idea. But the thing you've got to focus on is that the people that are interested in your idea, because, you know, we are so subjective with the articles that we read, you know, and there are so many ideas that maybe we couldn't see potential in, that if we just had a little bit more self-belief and worked on over time, we can actually find something that's actually really inspiring there. And I know for a lot of my articles that have done well, and the like big things in the past that I've done, it's been a process. It's not just been an overnight, oh my God, this is it idea. It's been something that I've had to really dedicate a bit of discipline and training to, and often self-edit as well, because it's so easy when we've got an idea to think that idea is amazing. Like that's fantastic. If anyone tells me anything, it's, you know, negative, I don't trust it. My idea is 100% perfect. And you've got to learn to take criticism. I'm stubborn, like I'm really stubborn, but like taking criticism is the most humbling thing, especially when you realize that the person who's giving you criticism is doing it to help you, not to hinder you. And that's one thing that I've learned about being in a wider community of journalists, is that no one is insecure as much as you think they are. No one is trying to take you down. No one is trying to steal your idea. Like most 99% of the time, people are saying things because they can see it from a different artistic perspective, and they're just trying to help.
Yeah. And when it comes to pitching, how do you go through it, like from conceptualizing your idea and actually writing and sending out your emails?
So the way that I do pitching is I spend 99% of my day on Spotify at some point, whether I'm in the shower, I'm cooking, like I'm walking somewhere, I'm just working. I will constantly have Spotify on, and I will swear by Spotify radio. That is where I find most of my music. If I find a song that I really like, I will just set it as a radio and I listen through and then like anything that I like, obviously. And that's the main way that I kind of find new artists and discover new music. So where I go from there, say I'm listening to a radio, I find a song that I like, which leads me to an EP that has just been released or is going to be released after I do a little bit of research. Then the next best thing that I do is just, so I have a little book of all like my main like connections and like emails, because I find that depending on what idea you have, obviously you need to pitch it to different people. So I would literally just do like a general pitch saying, hey, you know, how's it going? Here's an idea. This is the artist. This is the history. It always helps to put in a few accolades. So like one main thing that I've discovered doing my site the past couple of weeks, because I've only set it up 2 weeks ago, is just doing research on the artist and seeing what kind of radio and label buzz they have, because that really helps. Because as much as you can be pitching someone, say, that you've never spoken to in your life, saying, I really like this song, an editor or someone who's going to commission that piece, they don't know you, they don't know how good your music taste is, they don't, you know, there's not that element of trust there. But if you can say, I've got a really cool idea, I think this artist is going to be really big. Also, they've just been announced as Radio 1's future artist. They've just got play with Jack Saunders, and they've got this coming up in the future. We don't want to miss it. Like, you've got to remember that you are almost selling to them, like a pitch is a sell. You're saying, this is my idea and this is why I think it's fantastic. So it's always good, especially because a lot of us come from like English literature-ish backgrounds. So we have that essay kind of style ingrained in already, but it's always good to have just a concise introduction saying what your idea is, a little bit of a body saying, this is what I plan to explore and talk about. These are the topics. Say if the music is focusing on a theme or kind of like a time in someone's life or is a response to events that have happened in reality, and then kind of end it saying, and you know, this is why I think it would be a perfect addition to you. I think ending it on a personal note is fantastic, because especially when there are so many like publications and kind of sites out there, you need to suggest why it's perfect for that site, whether they are focusing on emergent music, whether they're focusing on music by female musicians, whether it's, you know, what genre it is, whether it's dance, house, tech, pop. Like, it's a really good niche to kind of do your research beforehand for that publication, and then just slyly slip in and say, this is why I think it's great for you, because that proves you've done your research there as well.
That's another really great tip for cover letters as well. That's how I like to end mine, because at the end of the day, they're more likely to commission you or take you on board if they think you can do something for them as well.
Exactly.
How like the industry this year has been, it can feel quite isolating. People are not going to the office anymore. Everyone's at home. Have you felt like a bit isolated, or do you have any advice for people who are feeling that way and who are struggling with it a bit?
I mean, I haven't felt too isolated simply because I was freelance anyway. So I was fine as long as I've got a coffee shop to dip into, because I like being around people, being in that buzz, but being in my own element with my laptop, focusing on my work. The struggle that I had was kind of over the actual lockdown period, where, you know, it is easy to convince yourself that you are more alone. And but that's one great thing that I again found this year. Like, I have a really love-hate relationship with my mobile phone, and often push it away as far as possible. Like, I've got all my notifications turned off. I hate it. I hate it. But that's one thing that I've really utilized this year, is remembering that actually anybody you want is only at the touch of a button. Everybody is in your pocket. And everybody that is in the industry is feeling most likely the exact same way that you're feeling right now. So I've found that there's already that filter taken off. You don't need to worry about going to someone and saying, I feel, you know, a little bit disillusioned. I feel a little bit like separated on my own, because chances are that, you know, that person is feeling the exact same way as well. So I just think that the importance of community is something that I've really learned this year, because like, chances are you're not alone at all. And especially when you are talking to people that are so like-minded, they have the same ideas, the same beliefs, you know, the same hope for the future, that we're all going to be connected a little bit more. It is just about utilizing that online relationship as much as you can.
Yeah, definitely.